The email arrived at 9:17 p.m., and by 9:19, Claire Bennett understood exactly what it was. Not a termination, not officially. Administrative leave pending internal review. That was the language institutions used when they wanted you quiet but not loud enough to sue. The hospital corridors were dim at that hour, the kind of fluorescent hum that makes everything feel slightly unreal. Mercy Ridge Medical Center had a reputation in Chicago, polished, philanthropic, photographed at galas. The sort of place where donors' names were carved into marble and nurses were expected to smile beneath them. Claire stood alone in the staff lounge, her locker still open, her phone glowing in her hand. 47 seconds. That's how long the footage was. 47 seconds of Dr. Alan Roderick grabbing her by the hair in a locked surgical prep room after she refused to alter a patient chart. 47 seconds that would ruin a celebrated cardiac surgeon if it ever reached the licensing board. And now, administrative leave. They thought she would understand the message. Let it go. A soft knock sounded at the doorway. She didn't turn immediately. "You can come in, Marcus." Marcus Hill stepped inside like a man walking into weather he didn't want. He was broad-shouldered, steady-handed in trauma situations, the kind of orderly everyone trusted with the hard transfers. Tonight, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "They came to my apartment," he said without preamble. Claire shut her locker gently. "Who?" "Two men, suits, not hospital security." He swallowed. "They knew my rent history, my daughter's school. They had a folder, Claire." Her jaw tightened, but her voice stayed even. "Did they threaten you?" "No." A bitter exhale. "They offered me a job. Private surgical clinic, better pay, immediate start." There it was. Not intimidation. Incentive. Chicago had a long history of understanding the difference. "Have you accepted?" she asked. "No." His eyes met hers, searching. "But I've got a family." "I know." She stepped closer. "Marcus, I'm not asking you to burn your life down for me." He blinked, surprised. "You're not?" "No." She held his gaze. "I'm asking if you're all right." The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. "They want me to say I didn't see anything," he said quietly, "that I must have misinterpreted." "And did you?" His answer was immediate. "No." She nodded once. "Then whatever you decide, you'll live with the truth. That matters." He studied her face like he was measuring something. "You're not scared?" Claire considered that. Of him? Yes. Of them? Yes. A breath, but more scared of pretending it didn't happen. Marcus gave a slow nod. "You're braver than me." "No," she said gently. "I'm just already cornered." After he left, she walked out into the night air. The wind off Lake Michigan carried that early spring chill, sharp, restless. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated only a moment before answering. Claire Bennett. A pause. Then a voice. Low, steady, precise. "You should not walk to your car alone tonight." Her shoulders went rigid. "Who is this?" "My name is Dae-hyun Seo." The name meant something in certain rooms in Chicago, investment circles, real estate battles, quiet acquisitions that changed neighborhoods without headlines. She had never met him. "You have 3 people watching the hospital entrance," he continued calmly. "They are not paparazzi." Her eyes scanned the dark parking lot instinctively. "Why would you know that?" she asked. "Because 2 of them were hired this afternoon." A long silence stretched between them. "And you know this how?" she asked carefully. "Because I declined to hire them." She almost laughed at that, almost. "I'm not in the habit of accepting help from strangers." "I'm not offering help. I'm informing you that pressure has begun."
Her heart pounded once, hard. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care?" Another pause, not hesitant, measured. "I was in the surgical wing last week. I witnessed how the board responded to your report." She remembered that day, a tall man in a dark coat speaking quietly to the hospital director near the elevators. She hadn't paid him much attention. "You're on the board?" she asked. "No." "Donor?" "No." "Then what are you?" A faint shift in his breath. "Interested." That irritated her. "In what?" "In whether institutions that serve the public believe they are untouchable." There was something in the way he said it. Not anger, not quite. Precision. "You're playing a larger game," she said slowly. "Yes." "And I'm a piece on your board?" "No." His tone sharpened slightly. "You are the reason the board exists." That silenced her. "I don't need someone fighting my battles for me," she said after a moment. "I'm aware." He didn't sound offended. "You will fight it yourself. That is clear." "Then what do you want?" "To ensure the fight is fair." She considered hanging up. Instead, she asked the question that mattered. "Did you approach Marcus Hill?" "No." "Did someone connected to you?" "No." "And if they threaten him again?" Another measured pause. "Then I will address the individuals responsible." Something in his voice, contained heat behind glass, made her chest tighten. It should have alarmed her. Instead, she felt something steadier. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "I know enough." "Which is?" "I saw you in that boardroom. They tried to make you small. You did not comply." Wind moved through the parking lot, rattling a loose sign somewhere. "You're used to leverage, power." "Yes." "And you think that makes you useful to me?" "I think it makes me useful against them." She closed her eyes briefly. "I won't be controlled. I would not attempt it." "How can you be so sure?" Another pause, softer this time. "Because if I wanted control, you would not be the woman I'm calling." The honesty in that landed differently than charm would have. She exhaled slowly. "Fine," she said. "You can stay informed." "Informed," he repeated. "But if you move pieces without telling me, I will not." She started toward her car. "Miss Bennett." She stopped. "You are not alone in this," he said. "Not dramatic, not romantic, just certain." She slid into the driver's seat and locked the door. For the first time since the email arrived, her hands were steady. Across the street, a black sedan idled briefly before pulling away, and in an office 20 stories above Michigan Avenue, Dae-hyun Seo set his phone down and began making calls, not to control her fight, but to make sure no one mistook her courage for vulnerability again. The hearing was in 48 hours. Chicago had no idea what was coming.
If you were in Claire's place, would you keep fighting, knowing they could threaten your job, your reputation, maybe even the people around you? Or would you walk away and protect your peace? Drop your answer in the comments. I read them. And if you believe courage deserves witnesses, make sure you're subscribed. The hearing room didn't look dramatic. That was the unsettling part. No grand courtroom arches, no gallery packed with spectators, just a long table, neutral carpet, fluorescent lights that flattened everything into something administrative and almost forgettable, which is how powerful institutions prefer their reckoning. Claire arrived early. Charcoal blazer, minimal makeup, hair pulled back tight, not armor exactly, but close. Her attorney, Margaret Ellis, had 30 years of professional composure and the kind of quiet disdain for incompetence that made opposing counsel sweat. She sat beside Claire, flipping through a tabbed binder thick enough to break a toe. "You sleep?" Margaret asked without looking up.
Some. Good, you'll need your stamina. Claire nodded. Across the room, Dr. Alan Roderick sat with his legal team. Expensive suits, controlled expressions, the posture of a man who had always been believed. He did not look at her. At 9:02 a.m., the hearing officer entered. By 9:05, it began. The hospital's counsel moved first, skilled, polished. He questioned procedural technicalities, chain of custody of the footage, possible misinterpretation of physical interaction. He used the word vendetta twice before Claire stopped counting. She kept her hands folded on the table. Marcus Hill was called. He looked larger in this room somehow, shoulders squared, jaw tight. His voice shook at first. Claire felt it like a tremor through the table. "Did you witness Dr. Roderick make physical contact with Nurse Bennett?" "Yes." "What kind of contact?" "He grabbed her hair, pulled her backward." "Are you certain?" A pause. The room held its breath. "Yes, I'm certain." His voice steadied as he continued. By the end of his testimony, it no longer shook. Claire didn't smile. She didn't move, but something inside her aligned. Next came the video. 47 seconds. The screen flickered. The grainy hallway camera. The prep room door closing. Her own body pulled sharply back by a fist in her hair. No audio. It didn't need it. The hospital attorney attacked again. Motivation, career dissatisfaction, misunderstood interaction under stress. Margaret stood slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "In 30 years," she began calmly, "I have never encountered a hospital that believed intimidation qualified as administrative review." She dismantled their timeline with surgical precision, introduced internal emails discussing containment, presented witness statements the board didn't know she had. And then she introduced something new. 2 former Mercy Ridge employees. One appeared via video from Minneapolis. The other had left medicine entirely. Both described incidents involving Dr. Roderick that had been handled internally. The hearing officer's face changed then. Not dramatically, but enough. By the time Margaret finished, the air in the room felt different, heavier, less certain. 4 hours passed without anyone noticing the clock. At 1:17 p.m., the interim ruling was delivered. Claire Bennett was reinstated effective immediately. Dr. Alan Roderick was suspended pending full investigation. Mercy Ridge Medical Center was formally cited for evidence suppression. It wasn't everything, but it was real. Reporters waited in the corridor, microphones, flashing cameras, questions about culture, accountability, systemic reform. Claire answered carefully. "This is one case," she said evenly. "It represents something larger. Accountability isn't personal revenge, it's structural correction." Margaret guided the narrative like a conductor. Marcus found her afterward and hugged her hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. "You did it," he said. "We did," she corrected. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Unknown number. No, not unknown anymore. "I watched the live stream." She typed back immediately. "I told you not to come inside." The response came seconds later. "I didn't." "Where are you?" A location pin appeared, directly across the street. Claire looked up through the courthouse glass doors. Traffic moved between them. Buses, taxis, ordinary life continuing as if nothing seismic had shifted. There, coffee shop window. A figure standing near the glass. Dark coat, phone in hand. Watching. Not intruding, not claiming, just present. She lifted her hand slightly. From across 4 lanes of Chicago traffic, Dae-hyun Seo raised his. Margaret followed her gaze. "Friend of yours?" She hesitated. "Complicated." She finished the interviews, thanked the witnesses, let the moment land publicly where it needed to. Only then did she cross the street. The coffee shop door chimed as she entered. Warm air, low conversation, the smell of espresso. He stood when he saw her. The reflex softened something in her she hadn't realized was tight. "You stayed," she said, "because you asked me to." They sat across from each other. Neither spoke first. "You moved faster than I expected," she said quietly. "I prefer efficiency. And there's always a cost to that." "Yes. And I chose it." She studied him. Why? For the first time since she'd known him, he didn't answer immediately. "Because I saw you stand alone in that room last week," he thought. "Because something in me shifted. Because I am not accustomed to wanting things that are not strategic." Aloud, he said, "Because institutions count on silence. I dislike predictable outcomes." Her lips curved slightly. "That's not the whole reason." "No," he agreed. The room hummed around them. "What happens now?" she asked. "You return to work," he said. "You keep building your case." "And you?" "I remain nearby." There it was again. Not dramatic, not possessive. Steady. Claire held his gaze. "I'm not finished being careful," she said. "I would worry if you were." A beat passed between them, charged, quiet. "Dinner," she said suddenly. He blinked once. "Not as a thank you." "No?" "As something I want." For a fraction of a second, something warm broke through his composure, almost boyish, quickly contained. "Yes," he said simply. Outside, Chicago moved in its usual rhythm, but inside that small corner of a coffee shop, something had shifted again. Not victory, not yet, but alignment. And neither of them intended to waste it.
Dinner was her choice. Not a penthouse, not a place where reservations required influence. Just a narrow Italian restaurant tucked into a quieter stretch of Chicago's Gold Coast. Warm lighting, white tablecloths, waiters who had worked there long enough to recognize regulars and mind their business. Claire arrived first. She told herself it was habit, not nerves. When Dae-hyun Seo stepped inside exactly at 7, the room shifted in that subtle way it does when someone accustomed to command enters a space and doesn't announce it. Dark suit, no tie, composed, civilian, at least on the surface. He paused when he saw her. Not dramatically, just long enough for her to notice. "You look well," he said. "You're punctual," she replied. "I was raised to believe it reflects character." She smiled faintly. "That depends on what you're punctual for." The corner of his mouth moved, almost. They sat. Wine was ordered. Food followed. Conversation began the way careful people allow it to begin, neutral ground. The hearing, hospital logistics, Chicago weather turning indecisive in early spring. But beneath it, something steady pulled. "I read your full complaint filing," he said at one point. She set her glass down. "That wasn't public." "No." "Dae-hyun." "I did not alter it," he said calmly. "I wanted to understand the scope." "And?" "You were thorough." A pause. "And restrained." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Restrained? You could have burned the building down." She held his gaze. That wasn't the goal. What was? Correction. She didn't hesitate. Not spectacle. Something in his expression shifted. Recognition, perhaps. He leaned back slightly, studying her in the warm light. "You don't operate from fury," he observed. "Oh, I do," she said softly. "I just don't let it steer." Silence settled between them, not awkward, evaluative. "You came to this country young," she said after a moment. "How old were you?" 19. With? 2 suitcases, 1 contact, very little English. And ambition? A small exhale. Not at first. Survival. She waited. She had learned long ago that if you allowed silence to breathe, people would fill it with truth.
I worked in warehouses, night shifts, construction, anything that paid quickly. His voice was even, but something underneath it carried memory like weight. I watched who owned the buildings, who made the rules. And you decided to become one of them. Yes. Out of ambition? He met her eyes directly, out of anger. The honesty of that didn't feel theatrical. It felt measured, considered long ago. I grew up watching men who looked like me be dismissed, underestimated, used when convenient. A slight tightening in his jaw. Power corrects certain imbalances. And creates others, she said gently. Yes, he did not flinch. It does. The waiter returned with their food. The conversation shifted outward briefly, then curved back. There are parts of what I built, he said quietly once they were alone again, that I can justify. And parts you can't. Yes. She appreciated that he didn't dress it up. No polished redemption arc, just truth laid flat on the table between them, like another course. My mother was a nurse, Claire said after a moment. Atlanta, County Hospital. He listened without interrupting. She worked double shifts, came home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion, and nobody remembered her name. Claire's voice softened, but the people she kept alive did. That's why you chose it, he said. Yes. She met his gaze. It felt like a quiet argument with the world. I see you. You matter. I'll stay. The words hung there. He looked at her the way a man looks at something rare, careful not to touch too quickly. You stayed, he said slowly, when leaving would have been easier. I'm stubborn. I noticed. That almost made her laugh. The wine warmed her shoulders. The restaurant emptied gradually around them. Plates were cleared. Coffee replaced glasses. You had security outside the hospital, she said suddenly. His eyes did not widen. Yes. For how long? 3 weeks. She blinked. I didn't see them. They were not meant to be seen. That's not the same as asking. No, he didn't argue. It is not. She studied him carefully. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have refused. And you didn't want me to. I wanted you safe. And you decided that outweighed my consent. The question wasn't angry. It was steady. He considered it seriously. Yes, he said. The honesty landed between them with weight. She inhaled slowly. That can't become a pattern. It won't. How can you be sure? Because I am learning the difference between protecting someone and attempting to own the outcome. Her eyes searched his face for any trace of manipulation. She didn't find it. Good, she said softly. Keep learning. He nodded once. They stepped out into the cool Chicago night together. The city had settled into that late evening rhythm, quieter but not asleep. He walked beside her, close enough to feel, not touching. At the corner, beneath the street lamp, she stopped. He was nearer than she expected when she turned. Dae-hyun, she said, voice low. Yes. I don't move quickly in things that matter. I know. You're not a safe choice. No, he agreed. And I am aware of what you are, what you've built. I would expect nothing less. Silence. The air between them felt charged but controlled, like the moment before lightning decides to strike. I am careful, she said, and I am not asking you to stop. Then what are you asking? For the first time, something unguarded flickered in his expression. Not weakness, not dominance, vulnerability. Let me be worth it, he said. The simplicity of it struck harder than grand declarations would have. She reached up before she could overthink it and placed her hand against his jaw. Warm skin, faint roughness from the day. His breath changed just slightly. Earn it, she said. He turned his face just enough to press his lips against her palm. Brief, certain, devastating in its restraint. She let him drive her home. He did not touch her beyond opening the car door. Weeks passed. He earned it in quiet ways. The first edition medical ethics book that arrived at her apartment after she mentioned it once. No card. She knew. The black sedan, always a block away, but never pulling close enough to claim. The way he asked questions and waited for the full answer. The way he did not flinch when she disagreed. And one night, 3 weeks later, she stood in his apartment overlooking the city. Dark surfaces, clean lines, almost no personal artifacts, as if he had never allowed himself to settle anywhere fully. "You don't keep photographs," she observed. "No." "Why?" "Attachments complicate leverage." "And now?" A pause. "Now I am reconsidering that position." The distance between them had narrowed gradually over weeks. That night, it disappeared. There was no rush, no urgency born of conquest. When he touched her, it was with the careful attention of a man who understood the difference between possession and presence. She felt the distinction in her bones. Afterward, lying against his chest, listening to a heartbeat that had not fully steadied, she spoke into the dim quiet. "I'm still afraid of this." "I know," he said into her hair. "So am I." Oddly, that comforted her more than promises would have. Outside the window, Chicago breathed. Sirens in the distance, lake wind pressing against glass. Inside, something had shifted again. Not reckless, not naive, but real. And they both understood, whatever this was, would demand more of them than either had ever risked before. Part 4 would test that.
6 weeks later, the case closed, not with fireworks, not with applause, with paperwork. Dr. Alan Roderick's medical license was suspended pending a 2-year review. Mercy Ridge Medical Center issued a public apology negotiated word by Margaret Ellis. 3 board members quietly resigned within a month. The settlement reached with Claire was described in the press as confidential but significant. It wasn't justice in its purest form, but it was consequence. And in institutions like that, consequence was rare. Claire returned to work on a Monday morning beneath the same polished lobby chandelier that had once felt like a spotlight. This time, it felt different. Nurses met her eyes. Some squeezed her hand. Some just nodded. A few avoided her altogether. Fear was contagious in places built on hierarchy. She expected that. What she hadn't expected was the quiet. No one tried to make her small this time. Across the street, a black sedan idled briefly before pulling away. He had promised to remain nearby. He kept his promises. The national interview aired 3 weeks later. Claire sat upright beneath studio lights, posture composed, voice measured. "This case is not about one surgeon," she said into the camera. "It's about what systems protect and why. Accountability shouldn't depend on who has the louder lawyer." She did not cry. She did not dramatize. She spoke the way her mother used to after double shifts, steady, unsentimental, firm. In a hotel suite overlooking Manhattan, Dae-hyun Seo watched the interview twice. He did not interrupt the call waiting on his second phone. When it ended, he texted her, "You were extraordinary." Her response came a minute later, "You're biased." "Yes," he wrote back, "completely." There was a pause. Then he typed something he had not rehearsed. "Come to San Francisco with me when this is done." He stared at the message before sending it. It was unlike him to invite someone into the geography of his work. His world was compartmentalized, controlled. People did not cross between rooms. Her reply came slower this time. "Ask me again when you're home." He had been scheduled to return to Chicago in 7 days. He came back in 4. The airport was louder than he remembered.
O'Hare always felt like motion distilled. Rolling suitcases, reunions, departures, overhead announcements layered in urgency. He saw her before she saw him. Yellow dress, hair loose, no blazer. She looked less armored and more luminous. The careful plan he had constructed for this moment, measured words, strategic phrasing, evaporated. He crossed the terminal without thinking. "Come to San Francisco with me," he said the moment he reached her. She blinked once, then laughed, fully, openly, the kind of laugh that made strangers glance over. "You asked me already. I am asking again. You've been home approximately 30 seconds. Yes." He stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin in the cold terminal air. Claire. Just her name, but the way he said it carried weight, return, intention. She searched his face for calculation. She found none. "San Francisco," she repeated. "For how long?" "A week." "For work?" "Yes." "And what would I be there as?" The question was fair. He respected that. "Not hidden," he said evenly, "not explained, simply with me." She considered him carefully. Airports were transitional spaces, temporary. People made impulsive decisions in them. Claire Bennett did not make impulsive decisions. She said finally, "We negotiate everything else." His expression shifted, relief, warmth, something unguarded breaking through structure. "Everything," he agreed. He took her hand. She let him. San Francisco was not a vacation. It was boardrooms and site visits and quiet dinners overlooking the bay where conversation carried the weight of expansion. But it was also mornings where she walked along the Embarcadero while he took early calls. Evenings where he returned to their hotel suite and removed the armor of his suit with visible fatigue. She watched him there, without audience, without posture. Power looked different when it was tired. One night, standing at the wide window overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge lit in the dark, she spoke softly. "What happens when something threatens me again?" He did not pretend not to understand. "I respond," he replied. "And if the threat is not external," she pressed, "if it's the life you've built?" He turned to face her fully. "My life will adjust," he said simply. "You say that easily. It will not be easy," his voice lowered, "but it will be deliberate." She studied him for a long moment. "You're changing," she observed. "Yes." "For me?" "For myself," he corrected gently. "You made it visible." The distinction mattered. Back in Chicago, the shift became clearer. He withdrew from one investment quietly tied to men whose ethics did not align with hers. It cost him, financially and politically. He did not mention it. She found out anyway. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did." "Why?" "Because you were right." She stepped closer. "That can't always be the reason." "It isn't," he said calmly, "but this time it was." It unsettled him, the way her integrity recalibrated his compass. It unsettled her, the way his world bent when she drew lines. 6 months after the hearing, he asked her to meet him at a private rooftop overlooking Lake Michigan. No photographers, no spectacle, just wind and skyline. She knew something was different before he spoke. He was too quiet, too centered. "I built my life in compartments: business, strategy, risk." He inhaled once. "You were not in any of those." She waited. "I do not promise comfort or simplicity. I promise partnership, respect, and the willingness to stand beside you when standing costs me." The wind moved her hair across her face. She brushed it back slowly. "Dae-hyun, yes. I will not shrink to fit your world. I would not ask you to. And I won't be shielded from it either." He nodded. "You won't." Silence stretched between them, deep, honest. Then he reached into his coat pocket. The ring was not oversized, not ostentatious, precise, deliberate. "I am not asking for ownership," he said quietly. I am asking to build something that neither of us dismantles when it becomes difficult." The lake wind roared below. Chicago lights flickered to life behind him. "Marry me," Dae-hyun Seo said. Claire Bennett did not answer immediately, because she understood something he did too. Love for people like them was not surrender. It was construction, and construction required intention. Part 5 would decide whether they were ready to build it permanently.
Claire did not say yes because the ring was beautiful. She did not say yes because the skyline behind him looked like something out of a film. She said yes because of the 6 months before that rooftop, because he had stood across the street for 4 hours when she asked him not to enter, because he had pulled back when she drew boundaries, because he had changed, not for her approval, but because something in him wanted to be better aligned with the woman he loved. She stepped closer to him, the wind pressing her coat against her frame. "You understand," she said quietly, "that I will always choose the right thing over the easy thing." "I know," Dae-hyun Seo replied. "And sometimes that will cost you." "Yes. And sometimes," she added carefully, "it will cost us." He didn't hesitate. "Then we pay it." That was the moment. Not the ring, not the proposal. That. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for months. "Yes," Claire Bennett said, "I will marry you." The relief that crossed his face wasn't triumphant. It was grounding, like a man who had spent his entire life constructing empires and had finally chosen something that required vulnerability instead of leverage. He slipped the ring onto her finger with steady hands. Below them, Lake Michigan crashed against the shoreline like it always had, indifferent to personal revolutions. But for them, everything had shifted. The wedding was small by society standards, intimate by his. A private room overlooking the Chicago River, close friends, immediate family, Margaret in the front row pretending not to cry, Marcus looking deeply proud in a suit that fit him slightly too tight at the shoulders. There were no society pages notified, no press releases. Dae-hyun's world operated quietly when it mattered. Claire walked down the aisle without spectacle, no dramatic music, just the soft murmur of people who had witnessed the cost of her courage. When she reached him, he did what he had done from the beginning. He stood, not because tradition required it, because respect did. The officiant spoke about partnership, about resilience, about the difference between power and strength. When it came time for vows, Claire didn't read from paper. "I didn't meet you in a good time," she began, her voice calm but full. "I met you at a breaking point." A soft ripple of knowing laughter moved through the room. "You saw me when someone tried to diminish me, and instead of taking over the fight, you stood near it." She swallowed once. "You learned the difference between control and protection, and you chose the harder one." His jaw tightened slightly, emotion carefully managed. "I don't need you to fix my world, but I choose to build one with you." He exhaled slowly before speaking. "I built my life on anticipation, strategy, calculation." His eyes stayed on hers. "You were not calculated." A few smiles in the audience. "You are the only decision I have made without running projections, and the only one that has improved every outcome." Claire's lips curved. "You do not need saving, but you deserve backing. You deserve someone who stands behind you and does not eclipse you." His voice lowered slightly. "I will be that man, not perfectly, but deliberately." They exchanged rings, not flashy, not ostentatious, precise, intentional. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Dae-hyun didn't dip her dramatically. He stepped closer, rested his hand at the small of her back, and kissed her the way he had first kissed her palm, certain, restrained, devastating in its steadiness. Applause filled the room.
Marcus wiped his eyes openly. Margaret finally surrendered to tears. And outside, Chicago continued its restless rhythm. Later that evening, long after guests had left and the lights dimmed, Claire stood at the tall window overlooking the river. She had always found herself at windows, hospitals, courtrooms, rooftops. She watched cities like other people watched weather, reading patterns, looking for shifts. Dae-hyun came to stand behind her, his arms sliding around her waist. No words at first, just breath. "You know," she said quietly, "this all started because someone pulled my hair." He rested his chin lightly against her temple. "No," he corrected gently, "it started because you didn't let them win." She turned in his arms. "We," she said. A slow smile spread across his face, real, unfiltered. "We." There was still work to be done in the world, hospitals to reform, systems to challenge, decisions he would continue to make that required careful ethics and sharper courage. But now they would be made with consultation, with balance, with someone who was not afraid to question him. And he would remain what he had promised from the beginning, nearby, not over her, not in front of her, beside her. Outside, sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Wind pressed against the glass. The river carried its quiet current through the heart of the city. Inside, something permanent had taken root. Not explosive, not reckless, but built on purpose. If you were in Claire's position, would you have fought the hospital? Would you have trusted a man like Dae-hyun Seo? Would you have said yes? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. And if this story moved you, if you believe strength and love can exist in the same room without diminishing each other, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the most powerful love stories don't begin with romance. They begin with courage. And this one, it was built to last.